Hey guys, it's Connor, and I'm back, baby. Yeah, we're back here on Soapbox Games to deliver you some new content. And today we're just going to cut right to the chase. No, water cooler talk, how you been, where you doing, how's your mom, none of that, right? Let's just get right to it. And today I wanted to talk about Cyberpunk 2077, given that its new next-gen update just released this week and is now readily available on PS5s, Xbox One X's, and Xbox One S's. Now, this video is going to be a little bit different from my other impression videos due to the fact that I really don't know if I'll sink that much time into this new update given the amount of games releasing this month and have released this month, right? Tomorrow, as of recording, the 18th, Horizon Forbidden West releases. Sifu is already released earlier this month. Dying Light 2 is already released earlier this month. And next week on the 25th, probably my game of the year for 2022 that I'll be sinking copious amounts of hours into, Elden Ring releases. And I really just wanted to use this video today to really pose a question to anyone that's listening. And that question is Cyberpunk really worth your time in 2022? And I don't want people to take that question the wrong way as me saying like it's a bad game or I really hate the game, blah, 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 any of that, right? Because I do think for the most part, Cyberpunk is a good game despite its various flaws. However, I do think the flaws that are there are really going to make or break your desire to play this title. And to give a little bit of background information with this game, along with my relationship with CD Projekt Red, I originally bought a physical PS4 copy for Cyberpunk around release. I did that off of the goodwill that CD Projekt Red had built with me through the Witcher franchise, where Witcher 2 on Xbox 360 was my first game that I played of theirs, and then Witcher 3 that released in the PS4 generation, which is still arguably my game of that generation, along with possibly being my favorite RPG of all time. So like many who also purchased Cyberpunk with similar reasons, the end product that we ended up getting was a surprise to say the very least, right? I'm not going to harp too much on how the game launched, right? Because I feel like people have been beaten over the head with that. I will address sort of the obvious information that needs to be discussed because I really want this video to focus on the actual game of Cyberpunk instead of all of the external factors of Cyberpunk. But with that said, I don't think I've ever seen a big, huge AAA game from a big, huge AAA studio launch more broken than I have with Cyberpunk, right? From various bugs, glitches, to just overall performance issues on base last-gen consoles like the PS4, it made it almost impossible to play without experiencing these issues constantly. It also didn't help that the roadmap CD Projekt Red put out in the beginning of the game's release was never actually met. Everything that they said they were going to do, like the free DLC and expansions, were basically shelved indefinitely until they were able to get the game properly optimized for consoles. So the only thing CD Projekt Red was releasing in a somewhat timely manner were hotfixes and patches. That actually sometimes would actually break the game even further for last-gen console players. But moving on, the important part that you need to know is that the AAA video game industry had never seen a release like Cyberpunk 2077, and basically everyone in the gaming community as well sort of turned on CD Projekt Red on a dime. The performance issues were the biggest problems, like let's just call a spade a spade. It wasn't the only issue though, right? Through data mining, a lot of people found a lot of what was supposed to be the cut content from the game, which ranged from entire new sections of Night City down to the teeniest quality of life details that are expected from a game of this size. So what was the effect of all of this negativity surrounding Cyberpunk? Well, it really meant that a lot of people didn't actually play the game's content, which is understandable, right? The release really burnt a lot of bridges with CD Projekt Red's fan base to the point where I'd say a large portion of gamers have kind of given up on them, along with this game in particular. But how is the actual game, Connor? Well, like I said in the beginning, I do think Cyberpunk is a solid first-person RPG. I originally sunk 50 plus hours on the base PS4, which was a struggle to say the least with all of the issues that I had. And then when I got my PS5, I sunk another 30 plus hours into it. All Street Kid playthroughs, right? If you're familiar with a lot of the modern Deus Ex series, a lot of Cyberpunk's mission design is built around all of the core systems and mechanics that those games implemented, which really just boils down to 3 different playstyles: guns blazing, stealth, and the jack of all trades, which is a mix of both, along with an open mission design built to allow you, the player, to approach the layouts with these playstyles in mind. For the most part, the gunplay and stealth was pretty solid. I can't lie. I don't have too many complaints there. I had fun doing both, and I actually ended up leaning into the stealth playstyle the most, which is typical of me if the choice is there. However, the mission layouts in Cyberpunk really do pale in comparison to Deus Ex's design, which gave players multiple different ways to approach missions. Cyberpunk attempts to do this, but fails to have the same depth and complexity that the Deus Ex games have. Now, where CD Projekt Red lacks in mission design, I do think that they make up for it with the actual layout of Night City, which is arguably the biggest compliment I can give this game. CD Projekt Red really knocked it out of the park, making Night City a fully realized world that I found myself a lot of the times ignoring the actual content, right? A lot of the repeatable side quests, missions, so on and so forth, just to drive around and take in some of the beautiful visuals that Night City really has to offer. There was certain parts and certain times when driving that it legit felt like I was in Blade Runner, which one would assume was CD Projekt Red's goal from the start. If aesthetics was a metric to grade Cyberpunk on, it would definitely get an A+ in that regard. Almost everywhere you go and everyone you meet is fully realized within the style of this world. From the dripping, dark, grimy neon lights in the back alley streets of Night City, flying cars, basically zooming past you up above, even the chromed out and fully metallized cyborg people of this world who have taken any organic part that is left of their body and replaced it with something shiny. And this aspect has only really been made better with the 1.5 next-gen patch. And speaking of the patch, let's kind of get into what this has to offer players, new and or returning. Obviously, this patch had to address a lot of the major performance issues that had plagued this game for weeks on end, months on end, and I feel like the majority of them have been addressed. Obviously, there is a bigger population density within Night City. It looks really great. I mean, a couple months ago, whether you were walking down the city street, there'd be like 1 or 2 people there. Now it's a little bit more reminiscent to how they showed it off during the E3 demos. Same with traffic. If you were driving down the street, you could barely see more than 1 or 2 cars a couple months ago. Now there's actual multiple different vehicles driving by. It makes the city feel a lot more alive and lived in, and I really like that aspect of the patch. Visually, there are 2 different modes now. There is a performance mode, the 60 frames per second, and then there is the resolution mode, which is the 30 frames with the ray tracing. I've been playing on the 60 frames performance mode because I can't play 30 frames anymore. It's kind of like broken my brain. 60 is what I think the standard should be, and it looks gorgeous on the ray tracing mode, I can't lie, but it looks great on the 62, so it's really not that big of a difference. Now, there are some other details in the patch notes that you could really, dig up yourself, but just to kind of go over it, there are different weapon scopes, a new weapon included, right? Improved AI behavior, a reworked skill trees, I should say, which is really nice. And I think it would be really good for returning players to be like, okay, there is some new things here for people who already had played through the game. Overall, I think this patch is really, really solid. Okay, so now that we have a bit of the pleasantries out of the way, I kind of wanted to get into my biggest gripe with this game, right? My biggest negative my biggest con, right? And that is the illusion of choice that CD Projekt Red gives players with Cyberpunk. And by that I mean your decisions in this world, the V that you want to make, how you want to play, does not have any weight or consequences behind any of your actions, right? And because of the very linear mission structure that they do set up, there is no derivative. There are no different endings aside from the very end, right? Main missions are so linear to the point that every player is going to experience it for the most part, aside from very few small instances, the same way. It's not like a Mass Effect. It's not even like Witcher 3, which, Witcher 3 set this brand new standard, I thought, for Western RPGs with their decision making, because even some of the side quests in Witcher 3 could affect certain main story quests, right? Like, for example, you could completely miss in Witcher 3 the Letho quest, which Letho was a Witcher that you met in Witcher 2, and you could completely skip that. And if you skip that, he doesn't show up at Karamora during a certain main story beat, right? Here, Cyberpunk, because they want to make this game so accessible, so mainstream, to the biggest audience possible, they sort of cut corners around a lot of the story and a lot of the decisions that V is supposed to make. And to me, that is like numero uno, number one sin for RPGs. And Cyberpunk is littered with that, right? I'm supposed to be this big bad mercenary V, but in reality, I'm just some average guy shooting people. Yeah, every once in a while I'll be like, yeah, I heard of you, V. Yeah, you're really cool. But like in the narrative, it really doesn't affect you aside from very few main mission story beats, right? And like I said, the ending. The ending is the really only choice that V gets, right? Aside from that, it doesn't matter what you pick in a dialogue tree. It doesn't matter if you decide to go in guns blazing or stealth in a mission, because that mission is still going to end the same way. Whereas in Witcher 3, depending on what you chose, various outcomes for various different main missions and side quests could happen. And none of that is really in this game. And, you could attribute it to, well, they had to get this game out. They had to cut a lot of content. A lot of the writing had to be, sort of held back. A lot of the side quests had to be held back. Whatever it is, this is not something that they can just patch in. This is something that they need like an entire new sequel for. And I think they can do it. I mean, obviously they can do it. They made Witcher 3, and I have faith that they can make another great game. But, they need to kind of go back to their roots, because that's what made their last games so great, is because of the emphasis in weight that your choices had in the Witcher franchise, right? You could severely get different outcomes. But here, you're going to get what you're going to get because that's the story beat that they wrote. So that's what you're going to get. There's no differentiation, right? You're going to experience the same thing as other players. But with that said, let me kind of wrap this up and answer the question that I proposed at the beginning. Do I think Cyberpunk is worth your time in 2022? And I will say I do think it is, but with a caveat that I think it's worth your time when there's nothing else to play. Because while I do think there are some really great merits there and some really great set dressing, if you are like me and you love RPGs and you love the decision making that happens in RPGs, you're gonna have a big problem with this game, right? It's gonna be like something that's in the back of your head that you can't stop thinking about when you play this. And with that said, I'm gonna wrap this up. Thank you for listening if you have. I'm kind of getting back into the swing of things. I have the next couple weeks of content sort of lined up and ready to go. Next week I'll be doing a Batman review for the movie because I'll be seeing it on March 1st at the fan screenings early, so be on the lookout for that. I'll be putting up Dying Light impressions probably the week after that, Horizon ones after that, Elden Ring after that, so I got a bunch of stuff coming. I really appreciate anyone who's listening to this because my last video did like 27,000 with 1,000 likes and a bunch of different comments. So it was really cool to see that because, you know, it made me feel good because it lets me know that I'm kind of good at something out there. But until next time, you know, really enjoyed talking to you guys and stay groovy.